Hi everyone, it's Ethan with Combat Radio, and from an undisclosed location here in Los Angeles is one of our favorites. One of the best actors working. He's in every third movie, it seems like. You know him from The Road Warrior, Weird Science, Commando, the Power Rangers series. It's endless, and he's attached to probably 40, 50, or even 60 projects to be launched when the pandemic is over. He's the always working, very busy, very talented Vernon Wells. Vernon, how are you, buddy?
I am so good. Thank you, Ethan. How are you?
It's good, man. It's great to talk to you. You've been one of our favorites for a long time. You know, I worked with director George Miller on Happy Feet when I was over at feature development at Warner Brothers. And I have to say, he was a very impressive director, and he made the right call in giving you your first film. You had been working prior to Road Warrior, or what is Mad Max 2, but man, did he make a good call with you.
Yeah, I actually, when you say I'd been working, I really hadn't been doing that much. I'd sort of had some small roles in television things, nothing dramatic. And it really wasn't my forte, acting. I love being behind the camera. And I had started directing commercials and documentaries and things. So I was in my heaven, as they say.
Right.
I got asked to do a stage play by Michel Tremblay, who is a French-Canadian playwright, very famous for what he does. And I didn't want to do it because it just the subject matter didn't appeal to me. The whole thing was like, no, it's not really who I am. And besides, I'm directing. I'm not really interested in that now. And eventually they persisted and persisted and persisted until finally they broke me down, and I said, all right, I'll do it, more or less to get rid of them. And I did a little play called Hosanna, which in Australia they have and they may do it here too, I'm not sure, but it's called a filler. It's between two major plays. There's always a dead space of like 5 or 6 weeks before the next one comes on. So they have these little plays they put in for 5 or 6 weeks. And this was a filler. It was a filler that ran for 3.5 months. It took off and became this thing. And there's only 2 people in it, me and the other star, Robert and myself. And during the performances of that, Sandy Gore, who was George Miller's lady at that stage, happened to see a performance, and she rang George apparently and said, you got to come see this guy, George. He's something else. And George flew down to I had no idea, by the way, who George Miller was. Didn't know him from a bag of biscuits. It was just like, George Miller, why am I going having coffee with George Miller, for goodness sake? And my agent said, because he's doing a film. It's a sequel to his very successful Road Warrior film. And I went, that's nice. I've never seen Road Warrior. What is it? She said, I think maybe you should take yourself to see Road Warrior. So in between her and when George came to see me, there was a double bill at the local drive-in that was Road Warrior and Duel. So I went along and I saw it. When it was over, I was talking to a friend of mine and I said, I went and saw that Road Warrior film, which was okay. Man, that Duel, that is just so cool. I was so impressed with Duel. It was so funny. And then, of course, I went and met George, had coffee with him. We talked. We didn't really talk a lot about the film. We had a cup of coffee. We told each other ridiculous jokes and carried on like a pair of idiots. And he left, and I left, and I went back to doing what I did. He went back to doing what he did. And probably about 2 months later, my agent said, you have to fly to Sydney and do all the fittings and for costuming and makeup. And I was totally confused. I had, for what? And she said, for the sequel to Road Warrior, to Mad Max, Road Warrior. And I went, okay, I'll go, but I have no clue why. So, of course, I went up and saw George, and they shaved my head and did all the horror things to me that they were going to do. And I think I tried to talk George out of hiring me about 3 or 4 times, but he wouldn't have it. He was quite happy with his choice. And as they say in the classics, there, but by the grace of God, go you or somebody else. But it was me, and I was very happy that it was me. at the start of the whole career.
Well, you may have tried to talk him out of it at one point, but man, he made the smart decision. And what I love about it is he comes across as a director that is in his intent is to light it up in every single frame, and it's for audience members who think they know but don't actually know. The burden of being a villain in a movie is a little bit more in depth than it seems to be on the surface. And one of those complexities is making the good guy set up to be the good guy. That is all on the bad characters to do, which if it's done right, the audience has no idea that that's being mapped out and that's the blueprint. But that's what you have to do. You have to set Gibson up for all his heroic moments to be Max. And that's the real art of acting as a villain. And I looked at it again last night. My wife wanted to see it. She knew we were going to do this interview. And I just, I walked away from it again with the same way it was when I was a kid, going full throttle. Every frame delivers. Every frame with this guy. He is full throttle. And I love that there was all this, you said you went out and got the fittings, and it sounds like you did that without even seeing a script or knowing what you were in for.
Yep. I had no clue. No clue. When I got the first clue as to what I was in for was after we'd all signed. And by the way, just a side piece to that, I shook hands with George Miller and said, yes, I would do the film, and never signed the contract.
Really?
I signed my contract, I believe, a week after we finished filming.
Fantastic.
To me, it was like, I'm old school, I'd said yes, and that was the end of it. I didn't need the paper to say that I was doing it. But after we'd all said yes to the film, then George spent a week with everybody writing a backstory to who their character was. And then we would all read that backstory to George and Terry Hayes and Brian Hannon, the three writers of the film. We would read that at a round table with all of us there, Mel there, everybody was there. And they would say, yes, no, that's crap, get rid of that. And we'd go rewrite it. And we kept doing that for like 3 or 4 days until we had a sound basis of who the character was. That's when I realized what I was in for. It was like, oh my God, this is so far above anything I've ever done or who I am that this is terrifying. And I think that played a lot into the character because he worked off this energy that was more, I've got to do it, because if I don't do it, something's going to go really badly wrong. So I've got to be out there putting 100% in. And I think that's what brought that whole character to life, that he was just 100% all the time. He didn't have an off button. He was always had a go button. And it was never, like get up to speed. It was go at full throttle, or that was it. And I think that's what made, and George, I adore George, by the way. I think George Miller is one of the most beautiful people on the planet, and is so much of a wonderful man to work with when you're working on a film with him. He is so incredibly giving to actors. He allows you to go to places you normally wouldn't go, and he just gives you that permission, which is very rare. A lot of directors want to control what you're doing. They want to kind of keep it within the boundaries that they've set. Whereas with George, he seems to give you permission to go wherever. And his whole thing with me used to be, play it at 150% because I can always bring you down to 100. I can never take you up to 100. So everything was always big.
Yeah, that's the smart play, right? Play it at 150 because we can always dial it back. I love that he puts it in your hands and says basically, see what you come up with, and we'll tailor it from there instead of telling you to match or fit something. And the only time this character is ever in sort of a tranquil state is when he's chained up. But I looked at that movie last night and I said, I bet this set was a lot of fun to be on.
It was, Mel was amazing. Being my first film that I ever done in my life. Mel was amazing to be around. He was so giving and so easy to work with, like a big kid in a toy shop. And he was always pulling pranks and joking and laughing and having fun. The rest of the set, everybody was, I'd say, 24 hours a day, people were just laughing and having fun and just enjoying themselves and just doing what we would normally do. It was more like a summer camp, to be honest. It was more like a summer camp.
It looks like it. I mean, there's no way all these actors and talent comes out of the hair and makeup and costume tents with those outfits and those hairstyles and doesn't do anything but start laughing, probably. With what they're getting ready to do. There's no way there's not a humor. You almost have to have it in a movie like that.
Oh, it kept everybody sane. I mean, everybody loved the fact that they called me barometer bum because they used to say that the minute the cheeks of my ass turned purple, everybody had to get warm. So I was virtually out there with like freezing my ass off in the real sense of the word. Um, but it was fun. There was nobody walked around that set going, I'm the star, I'm this, I'm that. Everybody on that set, from the smallest role to the biggest role, was helping each other. We're all in it together. We're all doing our thing. And I think that's what made the whole film so successful, was that there wasn't this disjointed attitude between actors. You know, sometimes you'll see a film and you know that the star doesn't get on with the female lead, or he doesn't like someone else. You can see it in the way they react to things. Whereas on Road Warrior, you could see everybody didn't give a shit. We were all having fun, man. We were out there in the weirdest costumes, freezing our asses off, driving around in the weirdest vehicles man could ever create, and just having a ball. And I mean, that's what showed.
And that's your job. I mean, you're paid to do it. It's like unbelievable. It's Give me a day, Vernon, where you're out there and give me a production story where it just hits home like this is hilarious. I can't believe we're doing this.
Well, the funny thing is I was probably the biggest fuck up of all. Excuse French. I was
I'm
probably
sure
the
of it.
biggest.
I suspected.
I was totally, and I had this uncanny habit of, because it was so cold, if anything was metal, it was that thing of, if you touched it, you stuck to it. You know, it was like really that cold. And I always remember, every time I got on one of the vehicles or we were doing a driving sequence, I would grab hold of something to hold on. And when they said cut, all of the guys in the special effects department would come wandering over with buckets of water going, yeah, yeah, we know. It was like this whole thing. I was always stuck to something. It was just the most hysterical thing in the whole film, was Vernon stuck to something again. And every day, a typical day, we did a day there where everybody was told by George to be on their best behavior, because there was a Japanese film crew who was filming behind the scenes, and they'd be doing interviews with us. And of course, I'm probably the worst human being in the world to say that too, because I can never be straight. I've got to do something. And I was up on the catwalk, and this Japanese film crew they were setting their camera up, doing all this stuff. And so I was prissing backwards and forwards along the top of the catwalk, being as gay as possible with Wes, just having the greatest time, thinking I was just such a smartass. And this guy was asking questions, and I thought they were testing all their equipment, like the sound and stuff. So I would sort of pose in my little gay way and put my fingers in the air and do my whole little thing for him. And then I sort of went, okay, we're going to do the interview now. So I got myself ready, and he sort of bowed and said, thank you, and walked away. And I went, oh dear. And George Miller was standing across from me, and he looked at me and he went, Vernon, it ain't over till the fat man sings, and I ain't in the mood to sing. And I went, oh boy, I am in so much trouble, because I just done this whole interview presenting Wes as this total gay human being.
Now, Miller's obviously a master director, but did he have moments where, in trying to accomplish or paint sort of an apocalyptic landscape, did he have to pull some unique tools out of the toolbox, or were you guys pretty much ready to go? Was there ever a moment where he had to sort of apply some sort of psychology to get you guys to a certain point in tempo?
The only time he ever had to do anything that I'm aware of was Emil Minty and I got on very well. And George would say to me, don't become too friendly with Emil, because at the end of the film, it has to work with your enemies, not friends. And it wasn't that I ignored him. It was just that I'm sociable. So I would, Emil and I would play around and do things. And we always called him, it's not a snack, it's a meal, because of his name. So I was on the set doing that last scene with me on the front of the truck, and I have to come over the top of the truck and grab his hand, and he freaks out and does all that stuff. A big setup, not an easy thing to shoot, and we shot it, and I come up over the top of the truck and grabbed Emil's hand, and he laughed, because I came straight up looking at him with my face with all that makeup on and screaming, and he just laughed. And George went, "This is on you." And I went, "What?" He said, "Told you not to become too friendly with him, so now we have to do something." What he did was he put a sponge in my hand that had blood in it, and I was holding it. So the second time we set the whole thing up and did it, when I came up over the top of the bonnet doing the whole thing and grabbed his hand, blood just went everywhere. And he freaked out perfectly. That was the reaction that you saw on screen. And I think that was the only time I ever saw George change what we were doing to make it work. Every other time, he had in his mind where we were going, and we had all talked about this for 5 days, so we all knew where we were going.
Well, thank you, Vernon, and you are a modest and class act, but we want to thank you for bringing the magic to decades of kids like us and the fun-loving entertainment and the magic you have triggered. We are in your debt, and we need you back for a part 2 sooner rather than later, because we need the ratings. And Vernon Wells, baby, he means ratings. That's a ratings machine, Vernon Wells.